And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO at Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Martin Perelmuter, and he is an unapologetic idealist. He's passionate about people and ideas. He's been in the speaking business for about 30 plus years. He was a co-founder at Speaker Spotlight. Before that, he was a corporate lawyer, but we'll let him get away with that. He's got interesting views on the speaking industry and is a past president and served on the board of governors of the International Association of Speakers Bureaus. So here's somebody that sits sort of at the center of what's going on in the speaking world. So glad to have you aboard today, Martin.
Great to be here, Peter. Thanks so much for the invite.
So I've got so many questions and I'm going to just fire away if I could. So
Yeah.
as you know, you probably know better than I, there's so many people out there that say, hey, I want to be a speaker, right? And sometimes it's because their Uncle Melvin told them they're so funny and they do great wedding toast or whatever. What does it really mean to be professional, to practice the art, the craft, to make a living at speaking? What are the obviously there's the stage piece, but give me sort of the totality of what that world actually looks like.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many parts to it, and there's different types of speakers. There's those who have maybe accomplished something great. They won an Olympic gold medal or, climbed the Mount Everest or whatever it is. So they have something that they've done that
Wait,
gives them a
Olympic gold medal, like the kid, like the American hockey players, just
no, we're not going to go there. I'll just say you're only supposed to have six skaters on the ice, right? Five skaters and the goalie. So when you put seven or eight on it, it doesn't get called. It's a
oh,
little unfair.
details,
We
details.
won't go there.
Okay.
Um, No. So, so there's people who
Yeah.
have some type of claim to fame, a platform that gives them the opportunity to speak. But, for most mere mortals, it may be, thought leadership. It may be experience that people have in their professional careers that give them that platform. And people get invited to speak at conferences all the time, as often within their job, and those might not be paid events. So, they're there acting on behalf of a company that they work for. But to go out and, speak and charge fees and do that, is a different animal. And so, obviously you need to be a great speaker and great on stage. You need to have deep subject matter expertise. But then
Right.
there's other factors as well, like any business, you need to be able to market what you do. And so there's different pieces to that, if you want, we can unpack some of that. But
Yeah, so let's
really
talk
like,
about the marketing because I think
yeah,
everybody, and I'm not downplaying the importance of the stage presence, but frankly,
mhm,
that's table stakes, right? If you're not good, if you don't have a story to tell, if there's not a lesson to be learned,
yeah,
let's move on, right? But
yeah,
the marketing piece is, I think, where a lot of people struggle because you're selling you, right? You become sort of the product, and
yeah,
how you position yourself, whom in the marketplace you're positioning yourself. Pricing is so weird, right? Because if you and I were to go
mhm,
car shopping today, and I were to say to you, "Oh, well, what's your budget?" Right, that's going to dictate where we go. But with
right.
speaking, like you could have an amazing speaker that's 10K and someone that's
Mhm.
not as great of a stage present as a multiple of that. So talk about the marketing pieces. If I were starting out today, what would you be advising I think about?
Yeah, I mean, to just take a quick step back. So, for like you said, the thing you really need is you need to be great on stage. So like it is table stakes, but it can't be overstated how important that is. Because
Yes.
I think sometimes people think I'm just going to create some great marketing and I'll figure out the speaking side of it later. You need to be great. And a lot of speakers I know have gone out and done dozens, if not hundreds, of free engagements just to get their reps in, right? To really hone the craft. But once you've got that, once you feel like you've got something that's really excellent, yeah, if people don't know about it, it doesn't really matter. So the most important thing is video. These days, that is the most important marketing piece. So, to give you an example, I have clients that I've worked with in some cases for, years, even decades. And, they trust us. And if we say, hey, this person's great, they're going to do a great job, they'll be like, look, I trust you and I know you wouldn't steer me wrong, but I have a board of directors or I have a committee that I have to convince. And I can't just say that this guy that I know, who we've worked with says he's great. I need to show them something. So having a really strong video presence is super important. And to me, that means, you have a speaker reel. So that might be like 3 minutes long, maybe, 3, 4 minutes with just some highlights. It basically tells a little bit of story. Kind of, it's sort of like your business card and audition tape rolled into one,
Sure.
right? So, and then, having other clips from different talks is helpful too. But without having video footage of you actually on stage delivering a talk doing what you do, it's really challenging unless you've, flown to
So,
space.
so let me ask you a couple things about that because over the years there have been various, let's call them templates that people have followed for the speaker reel, right? Open with
Mhm.
you opening, show the
Yeah,
logos, audience reaction, somebody smile.
right.
Like there was sort of the
Yeah,
piece now. How are you thinking that's changed as evolved post COVID, given that when we talk about speaking,
yeah.
30, 40% of that might actually be done remotely today? How does a speaker convey, I could do this remotely and do it well, not just the stage stuff?
Yeah, I think, you see a lot of reels these days where, you've got some clips of the person on stage. There's also some of the virtual
Yep.
talks as well. And, and that's important. If like I'm looking at your background right now, like you have a set there, like people have a studio, home studios. And so,
Sure.
being able to show people, again, this is my remote setup, but we're finding about 80, 85% of events are in person now. So in person on a stage is definitely the most important thing. And having really good quality footage of talks that someone's done is great, and having different talks. So one might be in front of 2,000 people, and one
Yeah.
might be in a smaller, a boardroom in front of 20 executives. Like if someone has that versatility, it's good to. It's not just about having huge
Yeah.
stages.
So
It's showing different. Yeah.
stay there a minute because I think a lot of speakers get enamored with big, how big the
Right.
audience is, and clearly it's a skill, right? To be able
Yeah.
to garner the attention of people in 1,500 people. Not everybody
Yeah.
can do that.
Right.
But, to what you said was really interesting, showing them flex in a small audience because it might be an
Yep.
executive offsite, it might be a VIP event or something, and it's a different skill to be able to connect because sometimes when it's like 1,500 people, the audience are almost objects, right? But if you're
Right.
in a room with
Bit more of a performance. Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's right. So,
Yeah.
I wanna go now so okay, so we've done the marketing, we've done the reps, we've got it all down. Where I see a lot of thought leaders and speakers sort of miss some opportunity is not having the playbook that says, okay, here's the gig. It's going to happen in such and such a city in such and such a time. What am I doing 30, 60, 90 days before? What am I doing on site? And what am I doing post? Not just to be a great speaker, because again, you have an obligation to do that for your client,
Yeah.
but to thread in there ways to grow your business, which may include things that are not just speaking, advisory, consulting, learning,
Mhm.
etc. So how do you advise a speaker to sort of map out those various touch points?
Yeah, I mean, I come at it from a unique or a specific perspective, which is, we're really focused on like we're providing a client with a speaker for, let's say, a keynote for an hour at a conference. So our whole focus is everything we can do to make sure that that hour is as good as it can possibly be for the audience, for the client. So in terms of the prep, I mean, we obviously that you do pre-event calls and so forth, and there's a speaker we work with, Peter Katz, and he has a saying that before the first pre-event call with the client, he says the gig starts now. Like
Yeah.
that's right. It's not like when you show up on site. It's like you have that first event with that client. You don't do it, running through an airport like on a cell phone or whatever. It's like they're starting to form impressions of you at that moment where you have that first interaction. So, I think it's really key that every touch point with the client is really high quality as possible, so that by the time you show up on site, they've got to know you a little
Well,
bit and
so
they know
stay
you.
stay there a minute.
Yeah.
There's so much good stuff in that. I think thought leader, listen, they're on the run, they're on airplanes, they're running through there, or whatever. It
Mhm.
shows a level of, I don't know, maybe it's lack of respect on not being professional, whatever, where you're doing a pre-call, you say, hold on, I'm going through TSA, give me like, it's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, we're paying you a lot of money. Can we have your undivided, like if it was a job
Exactly.
interview and it's not a job interview, but you're not making them feel like the most important thing in the world to them, right? And you're
Yeah.
not conveying, I'm here to make you, Mr. or Miss Client, as successful as you can be. Tell me
Right.
what I need to know because showing
Yeah.
up and sort of throwing up, like just doing the same old show, it's not about
Yeah.
the speaker.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I think that taking the time in those pre-event calls to take the care to listen, to understand what their needs are, their objectives, and making sure that you're aligning your message is key. So, everybody's busy and has things to do, but if you're just kind of doing it like on the fly, it sort of sends the message like, yeah, 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 this is just sort of a necessary evil. I have to do this pre-event call with you. And that's not what it is. It's really that's where the valuable information comes out so that by the time
Yeah.
the speaker shows up on site, they're really well prepared. So, I think that that's a really important part of it. if you're a thought leader and you have other services you provide, consulting, training, coaching, whatever it is, my this is just my perspective is if you deliver an amazing keynote, those opportunities will present themselves afterwards, right? You want people like after an hour going, wow, that was amazing. What else do you do? Because an hour wasn't even enough for us. We want more of what you
Well, let
do.
me let me push on that though, because I
Yep.
get it, and coming at it from the bureau standpoint, that makes total sense, right?
Right.
But I think there's this phenomena that happens where up to the point of the event, the client always makes the time to talk to you, to speak with you. Why? Because the event's coming up. And then
Right.
the day after the event, and it's not a reflection on you or your performance, your personality, your ego, whatever, they're on to the next thing, right? They're planning the
Yep.
next thing.
Yep.
So even just getting a, hey, can we get a debrief call set up within 2 weeks of the event? I want to get the feedback. How did I do? How did that resonate? Whatever. Those are harder to get. But if you start earlier from a
Yep.
process standpoint, say, hey, would you like me to create a little 2-minute video to send out to the participants in advance to set the
Right.
tone? I can send
Yep.
out an online, like there's some other little goodies and treats that you can do
Oh,
that are value add.
absolutely. The thing I guess that I would be wary of is, I've known speakers who we've got a keynote book for them and they want to get on the phone with the client beforehand. The client's all excited because they're like, great, we're going to talk about the event. And they're actually trying to sell them other services.
Right, right, right,
And
right.
it's like, hey, we haven't even done the keynote yet. And you're
Yeah,
already trying to kind of upsell me. Maybe that's not, fair, but that's, I think, the way it can be perceived. So yeah, I think the value added things like the video messages and things like that are great. But if there's other things that you can provide beyond the keynote, I just think the important thing is just nail the keynote, do that as well as possible. It can possibly be done. And then you will have, some speakers almost look at it as almost like a paid audition to do other things,
sure,
right? Like,
sure.
and that's, that could be, I don't necessarily like that way, but it's true. I mean, we've had speakers who've gone and delivered keynotes and it's turned into, large opportunities that have rolled out over
Right.
years, but it
Yeah.
all started with that first event. So that's, to me, that's where all the
Right.
focus.
And
Yeah.
doing the work where I think the worst thing a keynoter could do would come in and, the basics. They use a term customer when the client uses client, right? They say,
Mm,
hey, the insurance
yeah.
industry is great, but they're in front of financial advice. Like, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it's
You just
it's
lose an
so
audience.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, understanding that common language is so important, right? And if it's credit unions, right, they're members, they're not clients or customers. And if you go and speak to a group of credit unions and you're
Sure.
referring to like you've lost them already, right? And
Yep.
you may have amazing content and amazing message for them, but not having that shared understood language is so critical. So yeah, getting, those questions that you ask in those pre-event calls are critical to really understand what the objectives are, what
Right.
the organization's going through. And then yeah, are there things to steer away from and not to mention, or the things to really focus in on? So, that the keynote I think is often
Right.
made or broken in before it even happens in the way that the speaker prepares for it.
So I want to get your reaction to a trend that I've seen over the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever. And it's less, right? It used to be the standard keynote was 45 minutes to an hour, maybe an hour and 10 Q&A, like whatever. And I could
Mhm.
recall not that many years ago, clients calling me freaking out, going, oh my God, they're only giving me 30 minutes. They're only giving me 30 minutes, they're only giving me 20 minutes. And I say, okay, well, hold on, time out. Let's take a deep breath. Like, you're getting the same fee in most
Yeah.
worlds. Getting paid the same to do less, people would celebrate. But it's harder to get it there less, right? If you're used to having a
Mm,
certain cadence to build up the storyline or use this favorite piece of yours, whatever. But I think
yeah.
there is a trend where you're not going to get an hour on stage, or you're not always going to get that hour. And how could you be
Right.
punchy and effective? What are you seeing there in terms of that trend?
Yeah, I think it started with TED Talks, right?
Yeah.
TED Talks,
Yep.
18 minutes, and I think up until then, people thought 18 minutes maybe wasn't enough to deliver a talk, and then people obviously consume a lot of TED Talks, and they start getting used to the fact that, hey, a talk should be, 18 or 20 minutes. So we do have some clients, but, the majority are still in that 45 to 60-minute range, and,
Okay.
I saw someone did a post a while back saying, like, the 60-minute keynote is dead, and I think it was just supposed to be some type of hot take to get reaction, because certainly from what we're seeing, it is not dead. It's alive and well. But I think the key is, as a speaker, you got to be able to hold the audience's attention for whatever amount of time you're given. And frankly, some are better at it than others. But it's funny. We have also had clients who are like, "Oh, we only want 30 or 20 minutes," so they want to reduce fee. And it reminds me, I think there's a old story about, I think it's Mark Twain, right, who said, I was going to write you a short letter, but I didn't have enough time, so I'm writing you a longer one. Right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
it's almost easier. If you're used to doing a 60-minute talk, that's easier. If you got to turn it into a 30-minute talk, you got to start taking things out, and it's actually more, in some ways, more challenging to, I think, to deliver the message in a shorter period of time. But it's doable, and as a speaker, within reason, you do what the client needs you to do. And so, if they only have 20 minutes on the agenda, if you don't think you can do a good job in 20 minutes, you shouldn't take the gig. But if you
Yeah.
take it, then you do it. And then the key thing is you got to take things out, because I've seen speakers go, okay, I only have 30 minutes, so I'm just going to talk twice as fast, right? And they try to cram an hour into 30 minutes, and it never works. So you got to be really deliberate. And if you got three main points in a
Right.
talk, maybe you only have one or two, and you figure out what the most important things are.
So the answer is not to have 5 Red Bulls before you get on stage and try to
That's
plow
right.
through. That's
Exactly.
probably not good.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about, there used to be sort of it was a rule or just sort of happened where if you're a speaker and then you were a speaker that had a book out, and then you're a speaker that had a book out that was, acclaimed New York Times bestseller or whatever, there was a direct and almost immediate connection to your fee. And I don't know. I'm not so sure that holds true to the degree that it once did. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think books are still important, and
Sure.
as a big reader myself, I like to think so. And certainly getting on, New York Times or Wall Street Journal bestseller list can help, but it's not like, oh, I'm on this bestseller list, now I can charge X. Like I studied economics in my undergrad, which is a long time ago, and I don't remember much about undergrad or economics, but I remember the supply and demand curve. And I always think, like, in terms of pricing, if someone is really busy, that they're basically having to turn down work and they're doing
Sure.
more than they want to do, that's probably a good indication they should increase their fee. But, if someone's not as busy as they want to be, just because they have a book out now doesn't mean they should increase the fee, because it's probably not going to make them busier. In fact, it'll probably be the opposite. So I think you should let the market dictate what you should charge. And, I know some fantastic speakers who have not even published a book and are charging really high
Yep.
fees. And I
Sure.
know some best-selling authors who are not charging huge fees for whatever reason. And it's a number of factors, obviously. And fame is one of the factors for fees, without a question.
Yeah.
Uh, Bestseller list can add to fame, but at the end of the day, to me, it's all about value. And are you delivering, the value that people are paying
All right.
for?
So as a fellow undergrad economist, that sounded like, on the one hand, on the other hand. I forgot who was the quote of "Get me a one-handed economist."
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Cool. As we start to wind down here, any other thoughts or things for folks to consider that are either in the space or thinking about being in the space? Or, you also find the longer you do this that sometimes there's people in the space, they feel like, I've lost my mojo. Like, like, what can I do to
Yeah.
remain relevant? Like, what, any final thoughts?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I always say the speaking industry is a really easy business to get in, because there's no barriers to entry. Anybody can
Yes.
claim they're a speaker or an expert in whatever, but it's a really difficult business to stay in, and to endure over years and decades. And
Sure.
so, I think constantly just refreshing your material, your content, your delivery, constantly renewing yourself is really critical. Because if you're speaking on the exact same thing you were speaking on 5 or 8 or 10 years ago, there's a good chance you're going to get bored of telling the same story, for the 400th time. And certainly, if you're bored of the story, the audience is going to be bored. So it's just a matter of just staying relevant, staying on top of the trends, understanding like what is going on in the world, what your expertise is, and how it relates to whatever happens to be the current situation. Things are obviously changing really quickly, between technological changes in AI,
Sure.
geopolitical changes. Like, the world is
Yeah.
really changing now rapidly. And as a speaker, and as a thought leader, obviously you've got to stick to your core expertise, but be able to apply it to a rapidly
Yeah.
changing
And I
world.
think that's a great point, because I think every thought leader has embedded in their work is sort of evergreen principles that are the same regardless of what the stock market did today, what's going on in the world today. But then to stay relevant, they might have written a book 20 years ago. So I'm just making this up, on trust, right? Well, we didn't have AI then, we didn't have remote work then. So how do you
Yeah,
connect the bridge to things that are people staying up today
yeah,
in a way that says, well, actually, the principles that I wrote about X number of years ago, here's how that connects to a remote workforce, or here's how it connects to feeling
exactly.
threatened that AI is going to eat your job, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the key. And it's just, and that it makes the work more interesting for you too, right? Like, you want to be able to me, staying current and trying to anticipate where things are going and understand how your expertise can help whatever, the organization or company you're speaking to is in the context of what's happening right now is really interesting. So I think that that's it, just staying relevant, constantly learning, constantly
Yep.
looking for ways to improve and renew yourself and refresh what you do is the key. And there's speakers who have done that really well and they just, it doesn't matter. Age is a number, right? Like
Sure.
I know people
Okay.
who are, 30 years into their speaking career and they're as relevant now as they ever have been because
Sure.
they're tuned into what's happening in the world.
Love it. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate your time and so much good stuff there. Thank you, Martin. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, great chatting.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.